folks do not want to do it, they will be held accountable for literally not following the letter of the law. But also we have to understand that if they do not like the law, they have an option. They can resign from their positions and they can run to be a legislator at the state or federal level, and they can try and change those laws. But so long as they are appointed or elected to those positions, they have to follow the law.
Tough talk from the chair of Senate Public Safety, John Albers, on immigration legislation after a weekend of crackdowns on illegal immigrants. Good evening and welcome to Lawmakers on Legislative Day 6. I'm Donna Lowry in Atlanta. After last week's wintry weather threw off the schedule for the General Assembly, it was back to work today. Appropriations leaders had hoped to have the all-important legislative budget hearings in the rearview mirror by now. One item that has generated lots of attention at the Gold Dome is immigration. 18 Georgia senators are co-sponsoring a bill to prohibit actions that permit so-called sanctuary cities. We'll talk about the legislation and have reaction to the detainment and deportation of immigrants in Georgia over the weekend. Also on the show, we'll hear what leaders in each chamber see as the priorities for this session. But as always, we start the day with a rundown on the activity at the Capitol from our correspondent, Sarah Callis.
Hi, Donna. With last week's snowstorm, both chambers have to play catch up, pushing many of the canceled appropriations meetings from last week into this week. That meant there was little for both chambers to do today. In the Capitol today, remembering the victims of the Holocaust. Today is International Holocaust Remembrance Day, honoring the day Jewish prisoners in the Auschwitz concentration camp were freed. Anat Satan-Dedan addressed the Senate, reminding them that diligence was still needed.
As we join today in remembrance, we must acknowledge why we are charged with remembering. We must acknowledge that the words "never again" carry with them the sacred responsibility of a commitment to action. Just as we look at the past today with a vision that clearly distinguishes between good and evil, a vision that clearly highlights who stood on the right side of history and who was on the wrong side, who allowed for evil to spread. Years from now, the world will look back at this point in time, the time that we are in. We are the ones who share responsibility not only to remember the past, but to examine what we are doing today in order to actively stand against evil.
A celebration today as well, as the Senate came together to celebrate the 25th birthday of Martha Haythorne. Haythorne is a Senate Assistant Anteroom Clerk and has Down syndrome. But that hasn't stopped her from hosting her own Zoom show, talking about disability policy with legislators, or graduating with a degree from Georgia Tech, and amassing a large fan club in the Senate. Besides receiving a Senate vest, birthday balloons, and fried pies to celebrate, Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones pulled some strings to get her very own Yellow Jacket football helmet.
I want to make a difference, and I want to create a better, healthier, stable society. So you can all join me in that movement, because that movement really helps people like me and me live my best life. And my life is worth living, and I am not going to apologize because my mother gave birth to an extra chromosome and gave me this. Don't limit me. There's been low expectations for me because I have Down syndrome, I have UP syndrome, and I approve this message.
In the House, another birthday celebration, this time commemorating the University of Georgia's 240th birthday. UGA was the nation's first state-chartered public university.
More than these things, and more than a land and a building, UGA is tradition, and it grows stronger every year with every student and every class. I asked you to give the University of Georgia on its 240th birthday a round of applause and our thanks for leading our state. Go Dogs! Sick 'em! Woo, woo, woo.
Later in the day, lawmakers I spoke to reacted to what immigration officials called targeted operations around the state. Federal law enforcement made arrests in Atlanta, Savannah, and other Georgia cities over the weekend.
I trust our law enforcement, whether it be here in Georgia or around the nation, to do their jobs. And we have somebody here that is in our country illegally. They have broken the law. So it is the job of Immigration and Customs Enforcement, as well as working in partnership with all our local and federal agencies, to make sure that they're held accountable.
So I'm just deeply disturbed that ICE has come into our communities, and particularly into our faith group, and taken people away from their loved ones, people who are not people who need to be arrested, right? They haven't committed any type of violent crime or any crime really at all. As a pastor, I'm especially deeply disturbed that they went to a church, knocked on the doors during a church service while the pastor was preaching, and tried to remove someone from that service.
Immigration has been top of mind for lawmakers this session. Senator Blake Tillery introduced a bill in the Senate that would crack down on so-called sanctuary cities. Senate Bill 21 would waive sovereign immunity for sheriffs, deputies, and jailers who fail to enforce immigration law. The House and Senate return tomorrow for Day 7. They'll join together to hear the Georgia Supreme Court State of the Judiciary. That's my Capitol Report. Donna?
Thank you, Sarah. Each year, leaders in the General Assembly come in with a long list of things they would like to accomplish during the 40 days. Today, we'll hear from some of them and get a preview of what to expect in the weeks ahead. For the Democrats, the issues include public safety, education, housing, and health care. And some of the priorities for Republicans include school safety, tax rebates and cuts, tort reform, and hurricane relief. Joining us in the studio to talk about this and more, and the list for Democrats, is Senate Minority Leader Harold Jones II from Augusta.
Yes.
Welcome to Lawmakers. We're always glad to have you here.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Let's start with something you're going to even announce tomorrow.
Yes.
And it's dealing with health care.
Dealing with health care.
That's a priority.
Actually have a bipartisan bill that will be coming out, Peach Care Plus, that will hopefully eliminate the coverage gap that exists in Georgia, and we can get 500,000 Georgians actually covered for insurance. So that will actually be coming out tomorrow. We look forward to it. It is bipartisan. You remember correctly, last year we were actually able to get a hearing. The first time since the ACA passed that we actually got a hearing in the Senate. Lost by one vote, unfortunately, in committee. But now we have a good bipartisan bill. We think it's very good because it's innovative. It's still going to use private insurance companies. So it's something that's going to be flexible and something that's going to fit Georgia. And we believe it can pass and will actually insure 500,000 Georgians.
So some people may not understand that we're in a new biennium. So
Yes.
even though you had a hearing on it last
Yes.
year, you're going to have a hearing again.
We're going to have to start back over. But we look forward to it because we were very encouraged last year, quite frankly, that we got that far. Remember, nothing had ever gotten that far before. So we're very encouraged what happened last year, and we look forward to presenting it this year, too.
Okay. Tomorrow we'll hear more.
Absolutely.
And we'll have it here on Lawmakers.
Yes, definitely.
Okay, I'm going to get back with you in a second.
Okay.
Earlier today, I interviewed Senate Majority Caucus Chair, Republican Senator Jason Anavitarte of Dallas. He called school security one of his top issues.
Last year we passed Alyssa's Law, got stuck in the House. This year we're coming back with Ricky and Alyssa's Law. Ricky's name being added to it. He was the coach and teacher who was killed tragically at Appalachian High School. And so basically this legislation is requiring that mobile panic alert systems be installed in all the schools statewide to notify public safety as to where there's an incident directly in a school, getting rid of the old technology that, you know, we're used to, like buttons and things, opening doors and closing doors and all that kind of stuff. But with the way technology is, we can pinpoint when there's an active shooter or there's a healthcare emergency maybe on a school campus. So our bill basically will require all the school districts to implement this. And with all the school funding that the governor's put in the budget over the last couple of years, there is funding for this. So schools should have no issues implementing it.
So the main thing is to make it universal, so everybody has access to it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, over half, I think, the school districts right now have it, but there's a lot of school districts that don't. And so we saw with the Appalachia incident in Barrow County that Barrow County schools put this technology in a week before that shooting happened. And I just remember at 10 o'clock at night when the governor went on TV and talking about the awful details of what happened that day, one of the first things he said was that this type of technology saved lives and allowed first responders to get to kids and teachers more quickly. So Coach Ricky was a hero, along with a lot of other heroes that were there that day, but the technology allowed them to save seconds off the clock to protect people.
Do you expect to have Coach Ricky's family and Alyssa's family down here at some point?
Yeah, I've talked to Alyssa's mom in the last week. I expect her to come up and testify, and also Coach Ricky's widow and family to participate in the legislative process.
Technology is changing so fast. Even what you're talking about today, by next year, may be obsolete.
No, it literally is. You know, one of the things people don't talk about is the privacy data and critical data that families have in these school districts, and foreign actors trying to, get to that data.
Okay. Leader Jones, your thoughts on what you heard about school safety?
Absolutely. School safety, of course, is paramount, and we always want to make sure we're on the right side of that issue. I've actually read that particular bill, so let's kind of look at something that may be added and also maybe taking something out. One thing that could be added, I think, would help would be a red flag law, which basically means we would actually know persons who maybe should not own firearms, and we could actually do something about that as a preventive measure. One of the things that was kind of concerning also dealt with mapping, which basically means that you're mapping the school to where if you had first responders come, they would know how to get into the school. That's not bad, but there was a part in there that talked about if you had mapping, then the school and the school district basically would be immune from any type of suit. That's a little bit concerning because just the mapping itself doesn't mean that the school is safe. You still have to do other things too. So I would like to possibly add the red flag in there and then look at this mapping issue too a little bit more thoroughly. And of course we have to make sure that it's affordable too. And I think the senator even mentioned that. He talked about the governors putting money in the budget that could afford that. And if that's the case, possibly could go forward on it.
And then as Democrats, you have some other safety measures, public safety measures.
We have safe storage bills that are out there, with one led by Senator Emanuel Jones. We talked about red flag laws. Also, as far as protecting domestic violence victims from their abusers, they're able to still purchase firearms. Unfortunately, we start talking about from a misdemeanor standpoint. So there are other things that we could look at too. But I think the bill has some promise. There are some issues with it that we can look into. But I think these are the type of things that possibly you could have bipartisan support on.
Okay, let's talk about any other priorities, especially in the education realm.
Oh, in the education realm, we have to be committed to public education. I think that's one of the keys. Of course, last year we passed basically what we call a voucher bill, but I think our commitment really should be to public education. And one of the ways of doing that is we can start weighing our QBE formula towards poverty. Georgia is one of only 6 states that doesn't actually take poverty into consideration as we fund our schools. That's something I think it can also have bipartisan support to where we look at that and we actually could fund schools also looking at poverty. Because if you look at any metric, when you look how students perform, unfortunately, poverty causes a lot of poor performance in our students.
Yeah, and I know changing the QBE formula has been a big task for a long time.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
Let's get back to you in a second. And I also asked Leader Anavitarte about other priorities too, and here was his response.
We're basically focused on tort reform, I think school security, protecting girls' sports. I know Senator Dozal, Senator Dixon have led on this issue the last 2 years, so we expect to hear that bill this week, move that through the Senate. We'll see what the House does with that. And then I think, the challenges we've had with Hurricane Helene, the damage to the ag community, the investments that we need to make to save farmers and our way of life in South and Middle and East Georgia, where families still have holes in the roofs of their houses, trees all over the place, the cleanup costs to local governments. I think that's going to be a huge discussion point in the weeks to come as Chairman Tillery goes through the budget process.
I have to ask you what's taking place with immigration, what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I mean, I've told others basically that since Inauguration Day, President Trump has basically carried out and said what he was going to do on the campaign trail in terms of securing the border and making America more safe. I think we've seen the ICE raids around the country in Chicago and other places where they're going after criminals. We know there's issues with cartels in Mexico that we're tracking here in America. And even in the last 24 hours, the back and forth that the president of Colombia has had with President Trump, and even a little bit the president of El Salvador, in terms of taking the illegal aliens that are here in Georgia and flying them back to their home countries. And I think right now it's about the bigger security picture of America and making our home more secure.
Okay, I want to get your reaction to what he ended with, and that's immigration.
One of the bills that is out there, I think, talks about the fact that you would actually remove immunity from sheriff's departments if they don't enforce certain things. Certainly we want sheriffs to enforce, but we also have to look at the details. We have to look at the fact of we want to make sure that we can enforce. And so therefore I would look at it more so from a violent crime standpoint. We want to make sure that those persons are not in our society, but I think it is going to be difficult, and the sheriffs have mentioned this, when you start talking about misdemeanor offenses. So I think there's some room to work in that particular bill, so we have to be a little bit realistic with that. But I think it's a huge step when you start talking about taking the protections away from our sheriff's office. I represent sheriff's offices, so that's a huge deal when we start talking about taking those protections away. So we need to kind of look at that. So once again, as a former prosecutor, I'm 100% for public safety, especially against violent crime. But we also want to make sure that we're also protecting sheriffs there too, as far as how they do their job.
Okay, so that's Senate Bill 21, and I'm sure we'll talk about it in the coming weeks.
Yes.
I wanted to get quickly something on tort reform. Your feelings about this reform?
Well, what we're really looking at is basically insurance and premiums that go up. That's what a lot of persons complain about, especially small businesses. The problem is that when you look at states who've actually done tort reform, those premiums do not necessarily go down. In fact, there's been members of the insurance industry who've said, we've never told you that insurance premiums would go down just because you do tort reform. So we have to make sure the two marry up. Right now, the research and the facts do not show that premiums are going to go down just because you kind of close off the courthouse. So we'll certainly look at all aspects of it. When you say tort reform, that's a big area. So there may be areas that we can work with, and we look forward to seeing what the governor has.
Yeah, it's a big area, and we're hearing that maybe by the end of the week, we'll hear from the governor on what he plans to do.
We hear that
Thank
too.
you so much for coming in, and we want you to come back.
Absolutely.
Huh? All right, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, we hear from the House Majority Leader who represents the brand new city of Mulberry, but don't confuse that with Mayberry. He actually jokes about it. And in the studio, another leader in the House from Gwinnett County, Minority Caucus Whip Sam Park. You're watching Lawmakers on GTV.
Just on the floor, Fulton had 22, and I wasn't clear if that was House and Senate members. Representative Park.
For all Georgia farmers at the state capitol during the session and year-round. Georgia Farm Bureau, the voice of Georgia farmers.
It's good to have everyone back together.
Good news indeed.
Put your feet up a minute.
It's beautiful.
How does that sound, B-man?
It's what I love doing.
Cup of tea.
I was thinking more double whiskey.
Hurry up! Freshly baked biscuits, always.
Well, this is all proving rather cozy, isn't it?
Understanding the past gives a sense of the future. This is the first time that anyone has seen this in 2,000 years.
This is amazing.
Well, I'm excited now.
Pompeii is a battle against time.
You think I'm joking, but look at this. It did really happen.
Don't let anybody tell you who you are.
History teaches us to honor the past.
When you look back, you're like, wow, that was pretty special.
This is something that's actually altering the course of history.
You're charged with keeping these stories alive.
Welcome back to Lawmakers. I'm Donna Lowry. We heard from Senate leaders. Now we get the priorities from the House. And in a moment, my interview with Republican House Majority Leader Chuck Efstration of Mulberry. And in the studio, though, Democratic House Minority Caucus Whip Sam Park of Lawrenceville. Welcome to Lawmakers. Thanks for being here.
I was happy to be here, Donna.
What tops your list of priorities?
So, we hear a lot of Georgia being the #1 state in which to do business.
The Democratic House Caucus, we are focused on making sure Georgia is the #1 place for Georgians to live, learn, and earn. And so really focusing on healthcare, education, and economic livelihoods.
Okay. I'm going to get back with you on a few of that. When I spoke earlier to House Majority Leader Chuck Efstration, he began his list of priorities talking about tax rebates and tax cuts.
We've gotten off to a quick start. First of all, tax cuts are a big focus. So states passed $6.6 billion in tax relief, rebates, and cuts over the past few years. Another $1 billion in rebates have been proposed by the governor and legislative leaders. Also, a further cut of the state income tax. So very excited about that. Major infrastructure improvements have been proposed, including another $1 billion for roads, bridges, and other infrastructure in our state. School safety continues to be a major focus, with a $50 million increase in the supplemental budget this year. That's on top of $50,000 per school that was passed in separate grants, and an additional amount of money that went into the budget that we passed last year. I think that we're going to continue to see common sense measures that matter to all Georgians. Certainly as Republican leader in the state house, we're very focused on issues, kitchen table issues that just make common sense and are important to Georgians across our state.
Another of the priorities for the governor, tort reform or civil litigation reform. Big on your bucket list too?
Civil liability reform is very important right now. I think passing it this session is really critical to many in leadership here at the Capitol. We have a system right now where Georgia's known as the #1 state for business. We also have insurance carriers that are leaving the state, and premiums are rising to such a high level that business owners and Georgians can't afford to pay them. And so we really have to look at all aspects of civil liability where we can make sure that plaintiffs who need to bring cases because they've been wronged are able to do that, but that there's not an undue impact on the entire system that really just doesn't make sense. And I think that the governor's proposal, which should be coming out this week, I expect, will really give us some guidelines as to what he's seeking to have done this session.
Okay, Caucus Minority Whip Park, there's a lot to unpack there. So let's start with tax cuts and tax rebates. Your thoughts?
Sure. So, the Democratic approach is really going to be focused on making sure that working families receive tax relief as much as possible. So as an example, myself and my Democratic colleagues have introduced the Earned Income Tax Credit for many, many years now. It's one of the most effective anti-poverty measures that incentivizes people to work harder and to earn more. We've also introduced a tax credit for childcare, as well as taking care of your dependents. One of the big challenges I think we're seeing with our economy as a whole is the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer. And we have to be intentional with ensuring that if we do have the capacity to provide tax relief, that we are being strategic and intentional with ensuring that we are lifting up all Georgians and providing opportunities for everybody.
And we're going to see some of those bills come through again.
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's tackle tort reform. Your thoughts. You're an attorney.
Sure. So, it's interesting because the governor has talked about tort reform being his #1 issue for, going on 2 years now. My team and I on the campaign trail, we knocked probably 30,000 doors, and not a single voter I talked to, brought up the issue of tort reform necessarily. And so we'll see what the governor decides to propose. I would agree with the majority leader that we do have to be cautious in terms of how we approach this issue. We have to be fair on all sides, certainly given the impact that it will have on all Georgians.
It certainly is big. It's going to have to be in pieces, I'm thinking, to go through everything. Okay, I know that you also have been talking about a tax credit for clean energy. Talk a little bit about that.
Absolutely. Georgia is a growing state, and I think especially with the debate over data centers last year and around the country, we have to be very smart as to ensuring that we are continuing to grow in a sustainable manner. So this legislative session, I'll be introducing a tax credit for clean energy production and investment in the state of Georgia. A few years ago, of course, units 3 and 4 of Plant Vogtle, the first nuclear power plant, came online. Carbon-free, emission-free energy for decades to come. I think Georgia can continue to be a leader with respect to clean energy, but again, we need to have the right incentives in place.
So what are we talking, solar panels? What are you thinking?
So the tax credit, they are based on 2 provisions in the Inflation Reduction Act, and it covers literally all potential clean energy sources, from solar to hydro to biofuels. Certainly with respect to our forestry industry, there's a lot of opportunity and promise there to be more innovative. I would love to see Georgia, again, be a leader with respect to bringing new innovative ideas to ensure that we are growing in a sustainable manner, certainly with respect to clean energy.
So are you thinking a resolution to just look into it, or a study committee?
No, it would be 2 specific pieces of legislation that propose a clean energy tax credit that would be transferable. I've also requested a fiscal note to really assess how much it may cost the state. But we've seen many different industry-based tax credits be very successful, the film and TV tax credit being top of mind. And so hopefully we'll be able to do something, or at the very least begin a conversation with respect to ensuring that tax credits incentivize businesses, individuals to be innovative and bring about more clean energy sources here in the state of Georgia.
Get them to think out of the box, huh?
Absolutely.
Okay. I know you and Leader Efstration are both from Gwinnett County. You're part of the Gwinnett County Caucus, and I understand it's 21 members now.
Yes.
You're just growing and growing.
Absolutely.
Second only to Fulton County. So it's grown quite a bit. Are there specific priorities, do you think, for Gwinnett County you're looking at?
First and foremost, I think for Gwinnett County, local control is important. We've had, unfortunately, many fights over local control, from redistricting to annexations. It's important that we maintain the historical precedent of local control, meaning we are allowing the local elected officials who are closest to the people to decide certain issues that directly impact voters throughout the county.
Yeah, I understand you're meeting tomorrow for the first time this session.
Yes.
Okay, so things will come out of that. So Gwinnett now has a new city leader in Chuck Efstration, Leader Efstration. He's the first to represent the Mulberry area, and I asked him about that. You're the representative for the new city of Mulberry. How does that feel, and is there anything coming out of Gwinnett County we can expect?
Well, it's Cities Day here at the Capitol today. We're so excited to have the city of Mulberry participate, Georgia's newest city, and it is, I think, a wonderful opportunity for local control, planning, and zoning without a city property tax. The new mayor was here at the Capitol earlier, so it's going to be a great success. I'm so excited for it, and certainly the constituents I represent have given me a resounding voice of support with the new city of Mulberry. New city, so exciting. It's Mulberry, not Mayberry. Sometimes that question's out there. But Mulberry, northern eastern Gwinnett, I think is going to be terrific.
Okay, not Mayberry. We know that. Okay, so that's way up in the northeast part of a huge county. Mm-hmm. You voted against Mulberry becoming a city. Mm-hmm. Why, and what are your thoughts now?
So I voted against the Mulberry proposal, and a lot of my colleagues did as well, because it did not follow the traditional process that we go through with respect to creating new cities in the state of Georgia. The Governmental Affairs Committee has a lot of standard rules that ensure that when we're creating a city, we're doing so intentionally, essentially over a 2-year period of time, to ensure that with respect to local services that are provided, there's a discussion between a future city and the county. It's a very complex matter with respect to creating new cities. And so ultimately I voted no, because it did not follow the traditional process that allowed for input from all the folks that would otherwise be impacted.
So what do you think now that it's in place?
Now that it's in place, I think there's still a question as to kind of what cities the service will be providing and what cities the county will be providing. The other big concern, of course, was with respect to the city charter, and that there were concerns that it would be unconstitutional, and that the Georgia State Constitution is very clear in that cities have certain powers, in which that city charter that we passed, and which I voted against, did not include. Specifically, I think it was the ability to tax. Right? I think one of the big facets of the city of Mulberry was we're not going to tax our residents, similar to Peachtree Corners. Well, when we saw what happened with Peachtree Corners, the legislature had to come back a few years afterwards and amend the city charter. And so who knows whether or not we'll see the same thing with respect to the city of Mulberry.
You're a big, big county geographically and in population. You think some other, and just quickly, any other cities maybe this this legislative session will pop up?
I hope not, because again, you know, if someone wants to create a new city, I hope that the folks interested go through the proper process to ensure that all individuals and entities impacted have an opportunity to ensure that that city will be successful.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate that, and you'll come back, I'm sure.
Of course.
Well, that does it for Lawmakers today. We'll be back tomorrow when legislators who are also lawyers join us to reflect on the state of the judiciary. Supreme Court Justice Michael P. Boggs will deliver his third address to the General Assembly tomorrow morning. Until then, have a good night.